Hello, welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for social justice and collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Today is a special episode number 50.
Woo!
We are going to reflect on the year that we've spent doing this podcast.
Oh, man.
So we're going to talk about some of our top moments we've had throughout the year. They could be based on anything, really, just top moments, but something meaningful we read or watched, or a moment on the podcast itself, either in front of the mic or behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So to do this, we've each prepared a list of these 5 moments that stood out to us individually so that we could come here together today at the table and discuss them together. So folks should know we haven't shared them with each other. I actually just tried to get Aaron to tell me a little bit about what he did, and he refused. But it's good. But so we may have some overlap here. I don't know that we will. We'll see, though. But I think in a lot of ways, this was an awesome thing to do yesterday, to sit and sort of take stock of all that we've done over this year, and to think about some of the episodes, to re-listen to pieces, read some of my notes, and it was great. And again, just this like great reflective exercise on all the work we've put into this year and all that we've learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that stood out to me is, as you just said, is all the work that we put into this show this year, and learning new things, and not just the technical aspects of like trying to create and produce a show, but also like all the things that we've read or all the things that we've watched, questioning some of the things that we already knew, right? So it's been a lot. It's been a full year. It's 50 episodes. Yeah. So how about you go first with number 5, and then we could trade back and forth.
Oh, wow. All right. I get to go first, huh?
Indeed.
No pressure. All right. So my number 5, all right. So when I was thinking about my most memorable moments, I couldn't fathom not talking about our very first episode. All right. So it was the episode that launched us into this incredible journey that we've been on for this past year. And so I think that makes it really special, right?
Yeah.
Like that episode will always just hold a really special place in my heart because of that. But I think there are lots of other reasons why our first episode is so special and memorable for me. So for one thing, it is the only episode where we talked solely about ourselves, right? We made a decision, and I think it was a great decision to sort of share pieces about our identity, to engage in that identity wheel exercise. You remember that?
Yep.
And I think that was important, and I say the right decision, so that anyone who decided to listen to our podcast could hear sort of right out the gate like who we are and why this work is important to us.
Yep.
So that's one piece. I also remember, like, I've sort of vivid memories of this. I was hella nervous sitting down at the table to record that episode, right? Like I've never done anything like this, right? And so I can, like I said, vividly remember like the butterflies and the anxiety that I had because I just had never sort of sat in front of a mic or really had never done a podcast. So, but I think a lot of that for me was cushioned by the fact that it was amazing to finally be doing it and doing it with you, right?
Yeah.
Like we had spent quite a while dreaming about doing something, and that something ended up being this podcast, and that was after years of building this friendship that we have, and right. And so I think there are lots of things that we like and love about each other and our friendship. But I think our sort of shared passion for and commitment to social justice and doing this work is hands down one of my favorite things about our friendship. And so that first episode is one that I'm always going to cherish. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get emotional here, folks.
We're only all right if you do.
Thank you. Yeah. That's also what I appreciate. I think that first episode is going to be one that I'm always going to cherish, not only because of what we shared in it, but because of what it means and what it represents, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the beginning, right?
It's
yeah.
the beginning.
Great. That's good stuff.
All right.
I'm looking
right.
forward to it. We got a lot of these to do.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right. So my number 5 is sort of a theme
Okay.
of the podcast this year. I feel like we had a few themes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about probably a couple of them.
Okay. Spoiler.
But critical race theory.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is one of my favorite themes of ours on the podcast this year, is we try to dig into the attacks on critical race theory and the backlash that anti-racist movement work has been facing over the course of this year. We talked about and had a variety of sources and articles and places that regarding this kind of pushback from conservatives, and really push back on talking about anything regarding racism.
Right.
From last week's episode, based on that Dr. Ibram Kendi article, to months ago when we brought and watched Mark Lamont Hill interview about a couple people from a couple people, some other articles. I think it's an important thing for us to continue to talk about and learn from. Even if critical race theory isn't all that conservatives say it is, right? It's still influential set of theories from some very brilliant people.
Yes.
They give us a lens to understand the racialized foundations of the U.S., right? And so it's not everything that conservatives say it is, but it is influencing a lot of the other things that we are considering and consuming and reading and watching, right? To probably some influence around like abolitionist theory.
Yeah.
Right. As you consider abolishing the prison industrial complex, there's a connection to critical race theory as that's founded in legal studies.
Yes.
So there are all these connections to what critical race theory is that I think is influencing a lot of like what we talk about here, what we read, what we're doing here. So that's one of my favorite things that stood out, especially as we are a relatively small voice sort of standing up and saying, no, these attacks are nonsense. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I think we wanted to do this podcast in the first place, is like, let's talk about important things and how we learn from those things,
right?
And how we can apply them to our lives, and being part of a chorus of voices who are like, this is BS.
Yes.
Like, these things are important and give us a framework to understand how things are working. I think is that's one of my top moments for the year.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I like the idea of us being in the chorus of voices, sort of doing this, right? And we spend a lot of time talking about critical race theory, right? So I can see why it's a moment for you. It's a moment for me too. I've loved sort of all of the media we've consumed about it and the conversations that we've gotten to have about it. And you're right. I think these conversations about CRT aren't going anywhere anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
But hopefully the attacks go away. We've got a lot of work to do.
It's quieted down some.
Yeah.
I think in the new year maybe we'll bring like a classic critical race theory text and read that.
Yeah, let's do that. I like that. All right, very good. All right, good number 5s. All right, so I'm on number 4.
You are.
All right. So my number 4 is actually, I chose to go the route of a piece of media that we brought to the table.
Great.
And it is The 1619 Project.
Nice.
By Nicole Hannah-Jones. We talked about, if you can fathom it, we talked about The 1619 Project way back in episode number 3.
Yeah. I know. I look back, I was like, we talking about the episode 3? Wow.
Episode 3.
Yeah.
So that was 5 ever ago. Even though this is moment number 4. But the 1619 Project stood out to me because it's something that we've talked about and we've referenced a number of times this year.
Yeah.
And as you just mentioned, critical race theory, right? Like these ongoing attacks of critical race theory and anti-racist education that are happening right now. I think the 1619 Project has remained in the news, right? And is mainstream. And also thinking about the idea that the 1619 Project was just published as an anthology book, last month? Yeah. And
the book.
The book, right? And so it's even more so now back in the news.
Yeah.
But I just remember being so moved by the 1619 Project, right? It was incredible. It was, I think it was awe-inspiring, educational, compelling, just really well done. And I really, obviously, of course, enjoyed the conversation that we had about it. I think it was clear when I went back and sort of listened. I think it was clear that we both loved it.
Yeah.
But while I think we had a good conversation with it, I think there were things that resonated with me. There were things that resonated with you, and there was just there was some great learning that took place for both of us, which is amazing. So I think the other thing I was thinking about with the 1690 Project is that I think it represents what we need. Yeah. And this is something that we've certainly talked about in lots of episodes and with other media that we've brought to the table, this idea of just how important it is to learn and to understand and to reckon with our history, and what that history means in the work we do to, as we say every time, learn and unlearn, and what we need to do to get us free.
Yeah.
And so that's my number 4. And if you still have not checked out the 1690 Project, I mean, maybe you need to buy the book. It's brand new. Get the book, scoop it up.
Came out.
But
it is an expanded
encourage you to
version
read it.
of that.
Yeah, it's expanded, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 1690 Project, right?
Yeah, great stuff. I recall that vividly too, of diving into that.
Yeah. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is also a single piece of media.
Okay.
Yeah. It's We Will Not Cancel Us and Other Dreams of Transformative Justice by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Yes.
I loved this book and how much we were able to dive into this idea of cancel culture, what it is and what it isn't, unpack what it means, in addition to the pieces of the book that are about transformative justice and finding new ways to hold each other accountable in community beyond the current criminal punishment system.
Yes.
Which I think actually, as a quick tangent, I think criminal punishment system is one of my favorite pieces of new vocabulary in our
yes.
Yeah.
I think we made like an active decision to, as we were, whatever episode we started to first talk about that, I think we sort of both started to just change and really say that. And I think we've said it ever since. So I love it.
I think this book this book introduced us on the podcast to this idea of the culture of disposability.
Yes.
Which I think led us to talking more about abolition here on the podcast. There's a chapter in the book called Bringing Abolition Home. I think when you combine this book with Mark Lamont Hill's We Still Here, which we read before this, actually, I think, those two things are probably the first things we brought on the show that mentioned prison abolition. Which, I said I was going to talk about themes. That's one of the themes as well on the show this year, is talking about that. I think when you combine these two books, it really set the stage for us to get into abolition as much as we did this year.
Yep.
And there are elements here that I think continue to influence the way that I think and operate in the world. Her definition of conflict, I think, is so good. It's a disagreement, difference, or argument between two or more people. It can be personal, political, or structural. And there may be power differences, and there will most likely be dynamics of privilege and oppression at play.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a great and simple definition, but not overly simple. And it leaves room for expansiveness, right? It leaves room for there to be more included than what's on the surface, which I think is so important for us to think about. And it's important for us to consider what conflict is, because we conflate it with so much else.
Yes.
This book for me, and reading this, is a moment that sticks out because of what it led us to do and dive into.
Oh, that's awesome. I hadn't really thought about or considered the idea that sort of was the, what do you call it, the catalyst maybe, of getting us to talking about abolition, because I think we spent a lot of episodes talking about abolition, right? But and it certainly was after that, I think. You're right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that was an incredible book for lots of reasons, and there was lots of learning that we did in that book, but for it to get us on the abolition train in the way that it did, it is worthy of being a moment. So I appreciate that. Very good. All right, remind me. I'm on 3. I don't know why I can't keep track. I'm just so excited. All right, number 3. You know what? I'm going to give you partial credit.
All right.
For my number 3.
Great.
All right. because I've been thinking about, I can't stop thinking about something that you said in just a couple of weeks ago in episode 48, where we talked about Dr. Ibram X. Kendi's article, The Mantra of White Supremacy.
Yep.
And it is a combination of what you brought to the table as your application and your homework that week. In application, you talked about your reflections on something Dr. Kendi asked in the article, and you shared how you felt it was vital that we recognize and understand the foundational philosophies and elements of white supremacy when they are happening around us in our everyday lives, and also in mainstream. You recall this? And you also sort of mentioned and talked about this idea of recognizing coded language when we hear it. And I just thought that was brilliant application. And then you basically said, hold my beer, Damien, because your homework was sort of a call for us to collectively figure out how we dismantle white supremacy, how we work to undermine these arguments that are out here now against critical race theory, and how we sort of like name and understand how racism is operating in our world, right?
Yeah.
And how important it is that we do all of this so that we can truly transform the world. And I don't know why, but that combo punch of application homework I thought was just fantastic. So I want to give you credit there.
Well, thank you.
And I think I said it in the moment. I think I was like, I think this is the best homework we've had. So I'm going to give you credit there for this. But sort of broad than that, I'm only giving you partial credit because I think sort of more broadly is this idea for me as a moment. It's not really the right word, but it connects to this idea for me that I love that we bring application and homework to the table each week, right? I think we've had some folks, both individually and, I think we've been together and folks have said this to us, like some listeners have shared that they feel like it's good that we do that. And that's been really nice to hear. And I think that was an intentional decision for us as we were coming up with sort of the format of these episodes. And so yeah, on one hand, thank you for the application and homework that you shared in that episode. And I think more broadly, more broadly on a personal level, like thank you always for like your good thinking and recognition and analysis that you bring to the table each week, my friend. I just have really loved those two sections of our episodes each week, and it sort of allows us to, really sort of take a different view of the media, right?
Yeah.
And sort of figure out like, how does this apply in our everyday lives? What work can we be doing beyond sort of reading this or watching this? So I've appreciated that and that part of our podcast.
Yeah, that was important because we, sort of part of the origin of this podcast was we were talking about this in the summer of 2020, right? Yeah. And so there were lots of reading lists going around and people talking about like, let's start a book club and do the thing. And book clubs are great. You learn, you do the reading, you learn from people, you learn from the text. But we also have to figure out how we apply it to our lives and continue to learn, right?
Yes.
Like it's not just about reading the text and that being it. There's also continued work that happens after that. Just having book groups, which again are great.
Yep.
And it's not a slate against them
at all.
But, just book groups are not going to get us to liberation.
Absolutely.
So, awesome stuff. All right. So my number 3, is sort of a theme. I think it's talking about current events.
Okay.
So, talking about laws in Florida, like I think HB1, we had an episode about that.
Yep.
Or the repeal of the Maryland Officer Bill of Rights.
Yep.
We also talked about gerrymandering and the way that's going to happen with the census data
right?
coming out and stuff.
I remember
so
that.
I really like the weeks we spent talking about current events that were happening because it gave us an opportunity to connect the dots between the stuff we've been talking about on the podcast and some of the theory that we've read and the things happening around us in real time. It gave us the opportunity to bring some analysis to the news, which I thought was great because it's like whole episodes of your favorite number 3, application and homework.
Yes. Oh man, we did not plan that, but that is
No.
perfect. Good.
Yeah, we did it. So I think that's great because we're kind of creating our own versions of theory, right? We're taking what we've learned from texts and applying it to the news.
Yes.
It's our own like remix of theory, of remix of theory to practice.
Yes.
In trying to understand what's happening in the world. Which I think is one of the whole points of the podcast, as I think you just pointed out, of like the application of the homework piece. We're trying to encourage people to continue to learn and deepen their understanding of the world around them and what that means that they or we all need to do to transform the world.
Yeah. Well, I love that, and it's connected to what's important to us too, right? So, thinking about what was happening in Florida, you're from Florida. Florida's home for you, right? We talked about Maryland. That's where we are, where we currently live. I think we spent an episode talking a little bit about the insurrection too, right? And so we're trying to, we've been intentional about picking things that are important to us, but they sort of are applying what we are talking about in all these episodes to real things, as you say. So I love that. That's very good. Current events. Good. So we have to keep doing that, huh?
Yeah. I don't see why we wouldn't.
And we're done. That was a first year thing. Yeah. No, I love it. All right. So
we're actually going to shift to just reading decades old books. That's it.
Oh man. Yeah, we're not, folks. All right. So number 2. It was very difficult to choose my number 2 because I think I was pretty torn in thinking about the fact that we've had a couple of, if you would call it, repeat visitors to the table, right?
Yep.
So I already talked about Nicole Hannah-Jones. We read The 1619 Project, as I mentioned. We also read a piece of hers in the New York Times Magazine. We took 2 back-to-back episodes to talk about We Do This to Refree Us by Miriam Kaba. We read 2 different articles by Ibram Kendi, right? The one on the second assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., the other on, as I mentioned earlier, the mantra of white supremacy. And
did we read something else from him too? Or was it just those 2?
I tried to go back. I still have I have the document up. I should go back and look. I think it was just the 2, but maybe it was.
I thought he had shown up more than that, but we
might have talked about. I think he has come up a lot. Yeah. Shout out Dr. Kendi. I know you're listening. We'll have you on the show. So right, all of those were amazing. So, but for my number 2 moment, we also took 2 episodes to reflect on The Will to Change. The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by Belle Hooks. And I think, I'll certainly acknowledge that I was probably drawn to choosing The Will to Change because we recently lost Belle Hooks, which is truly sad. But it has been something to read and see all the tributes that are out there to Belle, right? All the ways in which Belle and her work have touched so many of our lives and our upbringings and our education and our journeys to just be better human beings, right? That's been wonderful to see.
Yeah.
But on the show, we had 2 episodes. It was episodes 12 and 47, so some time apart. But those 2 episodes, I think, are truly some of my favorite episodes that we did. I enjoyed the conversations that we had about the book. I absolutely love the book itself, and I mean this in sincerity. I feel like that book forever changed. I feel forever changed because of reading that book. Right, the work she did to critique the toxic nature of patriarchy and masculinity, right? And sort of how I sort of personally sort of interact with those things and how I've grown up through those things and been challenged by them, have played into them, right? I know we both love her definition of love. The work she did to call out the need for us to love men in better and more healthy ways than we do, and for men to be given space to freely express love was huge. And then the whole concept of feminist masculinity was new to me when I first read the book, but I think it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Right. In so many ways. And so that book was incredibly moving and powerful for me, and helped me make sense of some things in a way that I'm just really grateful for. So so thank you, Belle, for everything. And thank you, Aaron. The tribute that we posted on our social media, Aaron created, and it was wonderful. And the number 2 spot, I think, doesn't feel worthy enough, but here we are.
Yeah, I love those episodes too, and they are. I have them in my honorable mention kind of section.
I've got a little honorable.
Yeah, I think here.
So yeah,
as I sat down to reflect, I thought about all of the things that popped out at first, like before I even like went and sort of referenced things.
Yeah.
And those 2 moments stood out. But yeah, it's amazing to think that we that episode came out the morning
after she passed.
The morning she passed.
Oh, was it the morning? I thought she had passed the day before, and then we just was announced the day that we.
Either or. I mean, the news came out about her passing a few hours after the episode had posted, and I was, you sent me a message that said she had passed, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? And so, I'm so grateful to her and her work, and all that she shared with us. And I posted a long Twitter thread on my own account with some of my favorite quotes from her, and also I think what her work has meant to me and how much I kind of carry it with me.
Yes.
As I continue to exist and be in the world.
I went back I went back and I listened to those episodes, and I think it's also clear that, and I think we've done this sort of in our friendship, but then also sort of beyond, like it's changed the way I sort of think about what love is, and how I talk about it, how I express it, how I'm trying to be better, right? And I think there were some clear ways in which we talked about how that impacts sort of our lives separately and with other people and the relationships that we're in. But I also think I think it deepened some connection for us too.
Yeah.
I feel that. So
yeah,
we owe so much to her.
Yeah, I have so much sort of reverence for her and the work that she brought into the world. So thank you, Belle.
Yeah.
All right. My number 2.
All right.
Is I don't know how to describe it.
Okay.
What I called it is getting to be pretty radical.
Okay.
So early on, I think when we were planning the podcast, I wasn't quite sure what kind of direction we were going to want to take.
Okay.
Or how surface level we thought we'd have to be.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how much we'd have to kind of pull back on what we wanted to talk about here. And I think there are, lots of ways where we could have decided to keep this more surface level than we have.
Yeah.
And we have chosen not to.
Yeah.
And I think, to a certain extent, I think that's conscious decision making. But I think to a certain level, it's also who we are and who we've chosen to be in this space with each other.
Yeah.
I think that we could have decided to talk more about inclusion and representation and kind of reformist kinds of approaches to things. But I think we gave ourselves this space to get into some fairly radical stuff.
Yes, we did.
And I think that is a credit, I know, to probably Bell Hooks, right? It's a credit also to Angela Davis, who says radical is simply grasping at the root.
Yep.
Abolition of the prison industrial complex is a key example of a place where we let ourselves get radical.
We went there.
in this space. But also, I think just including ideas like collective liberation, which again is another influence of Bell Hooks on our show.
Yep.
Because she coined that term, and talking about how we all have to get free from these systems of oppression that intersect and connect. So, from the start, we included that idea and that concept. And I think that's a big standout for me because it gave us a space to do a wide range of things here in our 50 episodes this year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you talk about how we even say that in every single episode, collective liberation, right? And so there was some intention there, and maybe it was subconscious, maybe we both just sort of agreed to it, and
I wanted to include it because I wanted to include it because it feels. I read that concept from her and was like, no, that's it.
That's it. It feels right. We believe in it, and so we should talk about it, right? And so it gave us sort of the space to be able to do that. And I think there have been some episodes where you've pushed stop when the record, and we've looked at each other and like, oh wow, yeah, we did that. We said that. We did this, right? Oh. But there have legit and honestly been no regrets about anything that we've shared. And you're right. I think we've gone there and we've allowed ourselves to go there. And not to say that we have shared everything. I mean, these episodes are 30 some minutes, right? We can't talk about everything. So we've also certainly had some conversations offline to continue the conversations that we have sitting here at the table, right? And and those obviously when the microphone is off, we talk about anything and everything. Nothing's off limits, right? But yeah, I agree. I think we've done really well to bring it here. Yeah. I like it. What was the theme? What did you call the theme?
Getting to be pretty radical.
Getting to be pretty radical. Yeah, we've done that. Very good. All right. Good number 2.
Thank you.
All right. So should we do it? Should we move on to
let's move on. What's your number 1?
Number 1. Wow. I thought my number 2 decision was difficult. Like, how am I supposed to choose the most memorable moment? So I talked about having a honorable mention list. Like, you think about the fact that, to be more lighthearted. We talked about Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Right? In an episode.
That was on my honorable mention.
Like, I think Ted Lasso is hands down going to be one of my favorite television shows forever.
Yeah.
We talked about, as you mentioned, on my honorable mention list, We Do This Till We Free Us. Just an incredible book. We also watched quite a few films that really moved me, right? I think about Judas and the Black Messiah, which has just some of the most powerful acting I've seen and told just the most incredible story of the most incredible Fred Hampton. I am. And I also really and truly love the documentary Black Boys, which we talked about way back in episode 5. And so I think there are just so many episodes, so many conversations, so much media that we brought to the table that could easily be my number 1. But I went in a different direction for my number 1. And it has to do with our conversations and our work off the mic.
Okay.
Off the mic, right? Because you said we could talk about things off the mic. And so I did just that here. So,
my number 1 is maybe related.
Oh,
it might be. We'll see what you say.
All right, here we go. Ready?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really proud of Interdependent Study.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of us. And, I think just in the past week, we've had a couple of conversations about this, but and you said this at the very beginning, we have put a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of work into each and every one of these episodes and just this entire endeavor.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just super freaking proud of that. But specifically, my number 1 is the conversations that we've had about where we're going.
Okay.
And, since we didn't talk about this in advance, I'm not going to spoil anything, if you will. Not that there's really anything to spoil, but I think we are both really excited about the future. And I think we've got some dreams and some plans for both Interdependent Study and sort of this larger project, if you will, that we're doing here. So, so that's my number 1, just being excited for the future. So here's to the future. And thank you, my friend. Cheers to you. Cheers to our first year.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think my number 1 is sort of connected to what you said before you started talking about what you're excited about for the future.
Okay.
So my number 1 is all the work we put into this thing to accomplish 50 episodes.
Yeah.
From conceiving this idea over a few beers to trying to home in on the format and concepts here, and then reading and watching so many articles and documentaries and films, and recording what is now 50 episodes, all released within one calendar year.
Yep.
I'm kind of blown away by all this work. And if you listened to all of our episodes consecutively without stopping, you'd be listening for more than 30 hours straight.
Woo.
I think if you include this one, it's probably just over 31 hours, actually.
Wow.
Which is remarkable, especially when you think that behind those 31 hours are all the extra hours reading and watching things and preparing for our discussions and editing and publishing and posting on social media and developing strategies for other things.
Yep.
I like sort of tacking on to this idea is getting all of our equipment set up, figuring out things like the technical aspect of things in the beginning when we were on two, just plug in USB microphones, which drove me crazy from an editing perspective, to then deciding a few episodes in, like, it's time we're clearly like gonna be dedicated to this, gonna do it. Let's go ahead and upgrade what we're working with, and that's what the current rig we're working on now. All this from the production to the preparation and the editing process has been a fun journey, really, in getting this thing to be a reality 50 episodes later.
A labor of love.
Yeah, and ultimately working together with you has been a great lesson in finding each other's strengths.
Yeah.
And finding different ways to be flexible with each other and give each other some grace. If we're not quite ready to record one week, like finding other times outside of our sort of normal rhythm of recording, to figure out when we can do that. Because this is a significant role. It's significant work that we've been doing outside of our full-time jobs and having lives and all the other things that go into our lives, and squeezing all of this in and doing all this work and putting in all this effort to get to 50 episodes this year. Yeah, that's number one for me. So yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. We did it.
We did.
I'm not going to get emotional, but I'm really proud of this, and I'm proud. And so I didn't elaborate there, but I think you did, right? That's exactly why I'm proud of this.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of you, and I'm so thrilled that we did this together. And I think we've grown a lot as human beings, as men, as people. But we've also grown in our friendship as a result. So I've really loved doing this, and I hope, and we're also really thankful to all of you who are listening to us, right?
Absolutely.
We thought, oh my gosh, is anyone actually even going to care or listen to us? We've got some folks out there listening apparently. So thank you so much for that. This has been great. 50 episodes.
50 episodes.
Cheers to us. All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you for joining us today and for listening to Interdependent Study. As a reminder, for our first episode in 2022, I'm bringing the book Remake the World by Astra Taylor to the table. And so if you want to check that out with us, you can get it on Haymarket Books website. So please join us when we return back in 2022. And you know what I'm going to ask you to do, but in case you forgot, for the last time in 2021, please follow us, leave us a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Definitely follow us on social media. Check out our YouTube page and sign up for our email list to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. We are going to take a couple weeks off now.
Yes.
So we'll be back with a fresh episode for your ears, talking about Remake the World on January 26th.
Yes.
We are looking forward to 2022 and continuing this process of learning and unlearning and doing that right here on these two microphones.
Yes.
All right. Remember, it's not about us, but it is about us. And we'll talk to you next time.